is so the operations are pretty much just Control J. I actually haven't used Photoshop in a long time, and then they switched a lot of the hotkeys, and I used Mac for a long time, so I'm used to the command hotkeys. But like they switched, like Shift F6 used to be feather. Anyway, so I used all the hotkeys. It's been a while. So yeah, so Control J, copy layer, and then filter, blur. This is just what I used to do to like increase contrast in the center. Don't just blur. Use just blur. Sorry. Blur, blur, Gaussian blur, and then I have things on my screen. That's probably okay. This is where like the less scratchiness of what you were saying can come in. You could do 8. I'm gonna leave it at 4. No, I might do 8. This is where like the res depending thing comes into. That'll be okay. And then literally just go down here and soft light. And then you could either, I forgot the hotkey for desat. Shift Control U. I don't know if that's how it always was. You could desaturate it, or you could just switch the opacity down to like 50. And an interesting thing you can do as well is after you do that, so like this is without, right? So it does kind of look more like an oil painting. You're gonna probably push some things into highlights and shadows, but you can also invert it, which has the opposite effect, and desaturate it. And then instead of increasing contrast, that decreases contrast. Right? Pushes things more towards the grays. And then you can copy the base layer again. And then either color or soft light to re-increase contrast. But if you just go with color, it doesn't do anything because it's the same time. But yeah. It's fun. Filter, blur, Gaussian. Instead of 8, you can go to 4. Right? And then bring this down to like, what? Let's go like 75 or something. And so that's, you can, so if you hold down Alt and then click a layer, you get, it isolates it in terms of the visibility. I think Control is the other, whatever. Ooh. But yeah, so just copy layer, blur, soft light, opacity. And then if you want it less contrast, to push things more towards the grays, you can do that. Invert it. And then what you can do is, after creating a little bit of halo blur in your tones, if you want it sharp after that, I don't like using this method, but it's what we did in college. You know, Shift Control Alt E, which prints all of the layers below it to the top layer. It's the same thing as, I actually don't know if it's in, I don't know where it is in here, I just know the hotkey. Merge down, flatten, I actually don't know. So it's the same as flattening your image, but it does that, but pastes your flattened image to the top layer. Shift Control Alt E, and on Mac it's Shift Command Option E, whatever the buttons are on that operating system, I forget. Shift Command Option E is what it is, I think. My professors in college made the joke, they had a one-handed student once, and they're like, I can't do that hotkey. You can totally do that hotkey. But yeah, so Shift Control Alt E to paste the layer at the top, to paste the entire image, what you see as a separate layer on the top of the thing is what that does. And then you go filter, other, high pass. And then what that does is it gives you, it like, in essence, it traces contrast like around the lines of things and then paints the rest of the image neutral gray. So then when you, like 128, so then when you filter it in your blending, it is, the image like nulls, it has null effect on the entire image except for these contrast lines, right? So what you're doing is you're sharpening. So it does with luminosity and with color. If you can actually like see what's going on there. So like if you go to like 1, it gets pretty, it gets a little outrageous pretty quickly. So instead of, if you want a higher effect, instead of like going to 1, I go to like 0.5, and then you go to overlay, and then if you want an increased effect, what you do is you just Control J to copy that layer again, so you get the same amount of pixel radius being affected, but the effect is increased in intensity. But you see, you can start to get like crunchy. I don't know if the bitrate will let you see it, but like you start to get crunchies. But what that does is like without, with, without, with, right? And what you can actually do is, instead of pasting the 2 layers above your base layer, you can copy the background layer and then do the same thing. So then instead of using your edits as the high pass, you're using the base image as a high pass, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do, because then you're high passing the base image and then applying it over top of your edits. So you can bring it down to just above the base image, and you can actually high pass before you apply these effects to if you want, but that I wouldn't do that, because then you're sharpening your edges and then blurring them, and it's probably better to not do that. Anyway, I hope that kind of, it's not a single filter. I really hate that when you, Photoshop changed this. When you used to be able to, so you used to zoom out and then it would recenter image. Now it doesn't do it, and it bothers me so much. And I don't know where the like, you have to go like fit on screen, and then it's really annoying. I used to just center your canvas when it would fit in view, and it doesn't anymore. In Photoshop, I literally have no idea why you changed that. It's very aggravating. The other thing that's really aggravating is the crop overlay, doing this, and then you drag the image. You used to drag, like, if you wanted to move the crop up here, you used to, maybe it's in Lightroom, or I'm just so used to it that I, like, throw myself off. Like, you used to, like, whatever. Anyway, let's not do that. Yes, it's okay. Let's delete all these layers and do it one more time for good measure. Control J, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Just do 8, overlay, opacity, 50. And Control I to invert, because it's obnoxious. And then paste the same bottom layer. We'll do the, Control F is no longer redo filter. Alt Control F. Really? Really? They made Control F find instead of filter? You have to do 2 hotkeys. Are you serious, Photoshop? Really? No? That's not gonna do it? Bonjour. Okay. Sorry. Overlay. 50%. Oh, I did overlay, that's why I applied it. Soft light. Overlay works too, but it's a little bit more intense, which is why you do soft light. Soft light's less intense. You can play with these filters, but I use soft light because soft light's less intense than overlay. Anyway, this just kind of like nulls out some of the contrast that you get with it, which is why I do the inverted layer, because like you get really dark darks, and it helps avoid clipping. And to check the clipping, you can actually, I know the hotkey for this, or at least you can go into levels, and to see if you have, it's better to use an adjustment layer. I'm not actually doing an adjustment, which is why this is the thing. Oh, actually, I'm not actually doing an adjustment, which is why this is the thing, but I guess I actually don't know if it applies just to that level or not, so I will. So go into the adjustment layers and add a levels layer, and then to see your clipping, the easiest way in Photoshop is to hold down Alt and then drag this, and where you see pixels is where you start to get black. So I don't actually have any black. I have a little bit of black clipping and blues, and then you can do the same at the top. So we have a few pixels, but otherwise we're actually pretty safe. So that's an easy way to check to see if you're clipping anywhere. You could also go into printer gamut, but let's not do that. Anyway, I hope that is essentially what you were looking for in short. I don't know how long this is, 11 minutes? I hope that's it. I hope you have 11 minutes.